Welcome to the Creative Minds Smart Money Podcast, where we turn financial confusion into creative confidence. I'm Samantha Eck, Bookkeeper and Fractional CFO for creative entrepreneurs. Each week, I'm sharing my financial expertise and actionable strategies to help you build a thriving creative business. Plus, you'll hear from industry experts who bring fresh perspectives on growing your business beyond the numbers. Because building a successful creative business starts with strong financial foundations. Your next chapter starts now. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Creative Minds Smart Money. And I think today is going to be the transformation point. We are officially taking Bookkeeper out of our name and going and instilling that fractional CFO name entirely, because a lot of times I think that when people think bookkeeping, they think of the easiest option. They think of someone who can just get their books done to do their taxes. And that's no longer something that defines Firestorm Finance. Bookkeeping is the smallest part of what we do, but realistically, we want to focus on that CFO stuff. So I want the podcast to also reflect that so that we can really get into these topics and these things we want to chat about. All right. So that being said, one of the questions that I get asked very consistently online and almost all the time is, how do you actually know if you're making money? And making money is not just one question. Realistically, it's 5. And just having clean books and having really good books, it can't honestly answer a couple of them. So if you don't know which of the 5 you're actually asking, you're not going to get a real answer, and your business decisions just aren't going to be making sense to you. They're going to be made on intuition and gut instead of actual facts and data, which is so important to being able to run your business properly. The number one question that comes up in almost every intake conversation I have is, how do I actually know if I'm making money? And that's because most people aren't asking it because they aren't scared. They're asking it because the honest answer is very confusing. There's more to it than just answering a basic question, right? I can't just tell you, yes, you're making money, or no, you're not making money, because there's something that's so much deeper. It's hard for me to answer that honestly, even when your books are clean, because clean books is only giving you half the data. There's so much that goes into actually understanding if you're really making money, from the standpoint of time that goes into your work, from the standpoint of software costs, from the standpoint of if your software is actually working for you. There's so many factors and things that we really have to consider and think about when we're thinking about, do we actually really make money? So I'm going to walk you through today why this question is so much harder than it sounds. And then I want to show you some examples from a client side that shows why and what the honest answer will actually kind of require for us, okay? So again, am I making money is 5 different questions. It's not just a single question. You can't just say, okay, I'm making money by looking at your profit and loss. It's not that simple. And it's not something that can be done that easily, okay? When someone asks, am I actually making money? They're actually asking one of 5 things, like I said. The first one is revenue. How much money came in the door? That's the number that everybody knows. That's the number that everyone's familiar with, is revenue. You had a $50K month. Are you making money? The honest answer is that you don't know yet. It's easiest to see because it's the top line of your P&L. Like when you pull up your P&L, the first number that you see is your revenue line. Most owners can name their revenue offhand. All those posts that we see online from coaches and people who are talking about things, most of those numbers that you see are revenue based. And then, of course, revenue alone answers almost none of the real questions. It really doesn't help you with anything. It's just giving you the number that you brought in. It doesn't tell you anything other than what you brought in. And if you're like, oh, I made $100,000, but realistically you only kept 20,000 of that, and we've talked about this before, then you're looking at the wrong number, because revenue is such a superficial number. It's really not something that you should ever be 110% paying attention to, or something you should rely on for your business. Profit is how much of that revenue that you keep after any sort of expenses that you have. So it's the bottom line of your P&L. So you've got the top line of your P&L and the bottom line of your P&L. you had that first question, which was your revenue, how much money came in the door. Your second question is how much of that revenue you kept after expenses, which is profit, which most people know those two. Profit and revenue are two completely different numbers, and treating them the same is one of the most expensive habits that I see. If you had a $50K month and you had $48K in expenses, you're only making $2,000 in profit. Whereas a $30K month with $18K in expenses is a $12,000 profit. So that's the question where you're asking yourself, which one is actually making your money? You can kind of get some clarity at this point, but of course, there's a little bit more that we really kind of need to dive into and a little bit more that we need to look at that's not fully answered quite yet. The next question that we need to ask is our cash. How much of that profit is actually in your bank right now? This is why a lot of business owners are so attracted to Profit First, because with Profit First, they actually can see what cash they've kept. There's obviously many different ways that we can do this, okay? Profit lives on your profit and loss, obviously, but cash lives in your bank account, also lives on your balance sheet, and they're not the same number. You can have a profitable month and have no cash because you haven't had customers that have paid yet, especially if you have accounts receivable. You can have a losing month where you have negative and you have plenty of cash because maybe last month's invoices just cleared, like you had that AR come in from the previous month. The gap between profit and cash is where a lot of the am I making money panic actually lives, especially if you do have AR. Because when you're looking at AR, the invoice is going to process the month that you have that invoice in. So if you have an invoice in July, that's going to hit your P&L in July. But that actual amount is going to live in accounts receivable on your balance sheet. Once you actually get that money in, your accounts receivable will decrease and your cash will increase, but you're not going to see that hit your profit and loss, which is why a lot of times businesses will ask, well, am I actually making money? And I know that sounds confusing, but that's how a lot of accrual-based accounting works. And it can, of course, get confusing, but realistically, that's where we want to be looking at that full picture, where I'm always telling you we need to be looking at the profit and loss balance sheet and statement of cash flows, because without all three of those, you're missing that full picture of your business. The fourth question that we want to ask ourselves is what percentage of every dollar we're keeping. And I talk about this a lot in my Loom videos and my meetings with my clients. We actually look at what percentage of every dollar we're keeping. If you have $2,000 in profit on $50,000 of revenue, it's a 4% margin. Again, that $12,000 profit on a $30,000 of revenue is a 40% margin. It's the same as the am I making money answer. It's wildly different health. Like there's two different subjects there, right? You have a 4% margin and you have a 40% margin. Now, maybe a 4% margin feels comfortable to you and you're like, yeah, that's where I want to be. Maybe a 40% margin is comfortable to you. And what I mean by margin is that means that out of every dollar, 4% out of every dollar you are keeping in your pocket. So essentially what that means, if you were to take $1, you're taking 4 cents out of every dollar that's coming into your pocket. And I want you to think of that in the nitty gritty. If you're making the 12K on the 30K and we have 40% margin, we're keeping 40 cents of every dollar. So nearly half of every dollar is staying in our pocket. Margin over time is going to tell you whether the business is actually healthy or whether it's slowly getting sicker while looking okay. Margin is where we really want to kind of keep an eye on it. That's where we talk about things with profitability. That's where we look at really, when we're looking at profitability, we look at what our margins are and if we're healthy in our margins, okay? The final question that we want to ask ourselves is what actually landed in your personal account. If you are a business owner, oftentimes you're a solopreneur, you're working as a sole proprietor, you're working as a single member LLC, sometimes you're working as an S Corp. It's what actually landed, like what actual money did you take for yourself? It's different from any of the numbers that we had above. It's different from margin. It's different from your cash. It's different from your profit. And it's different from your revenue. You can have a profitable business and not be paying yourself enough. But that's the real question is because that's what's hitting you. And when you're asking yourselves, am I making money? It's because you're not actually seeing that. You can pay yourself more than the business earned, which just means you're drawing down your reserves. The question then becomes, am I making money for the business and am I making money for me? And those are two completely different questions. And the honest answers are just vastly different. It's not something that you can answer very easily. That's something that we need to analyze and something that we need to see. And the margin and the owner's take home are two of those things that you honestly just can't answer just by looking at your profit and loss. Okay. So I want to talk now about a client that I have that really shows you the difference, right? I have a very small creative business, and we compared the first half of this year to the first half of last year. So January through June of both years. Revenue was basically identical between the two halves, right? So that top line number was the same between both of them. We had that same top line number. However, the first half of last year, they had an $11,000 loss in their business. The first half of this year, they have a $48,000 profit. So the same revenue, almost the same revenue is flat, but a $58,000 swing on the positive. Now you're like, where'd you get that 58,000? Because you just said they made 48,000. They had an 11K loss, right? So we add that back in. Now, what actually changed for that client that brought about that number? First of all, nothing on the top line. Nothing about how much they sold. Nothing about that changed, obviously, because our revenue was the same. The difference was our cost structure, specifically with payroll. Over the last year, we rebuilt how she was staffing her business. That over time brought payroll down about 35%. So we had same sales, but we had a dramatically different keep rate and a dramatically different business because we restructured payroll, we restructured how we were paying people. Now, you might be asking, okay, Samantha, that's great, but how does this answer the am I making money question? The real answer is because if she'd only been reading her top line, she'd have said, I did the same amount of business this year and thought nothing changed. So she might have looked at her revenue and said, okay, well, I made the same amount this year that I did last year. That's great. She'd have missed, that 58K swing in what she actually took home, which again is such a big deal. So using the 5-question framework that we just said, 1, her revenue was flat. 2, her profit swung $58,000 in the up. 3, her cash followed the profit. 4, her margin improved dramatically. She kept more of every dollar that she brought in. And 5, her owner's take-home pay went up meaningfully. There's a different answer to am I making money depending on which of the 5 layers you're actually asking. She didn't sell more. She kept a lot more of what she already sold, and that's a completely different kind of business win, and it's invisible if you only track revenue. So again, it's important to understand which of these 5 questions you're actually asking. Are you actually wanting to know what your revenue was? Are you actually wanting to know what your profit was? Do you want to know how much cash you have in your bank? Do you want to know how much your margin is? Do you want to know what your owner's take-home pay is? Because they're all different answers and they're all going to show a different health side of your business. So am I actually making money? That question is individualized per person and what they actually mean with that intention behind this. Now you're like, Samantha, I can look at my books and definitely answer that question. Why do you think I can't answer that question? Well, clean bookkeeping is obviously the foundation, but the honest answer and to actually be able to provide you with that advisory piece, you need more than just a foundation. You need more information. Bookkeeping gives you that ability to run a P&L and a balance sheet, which answers the revenue and the profit side of things. So again, 2 out of 5. What bookkeeping alone doesn't do is reads the story across months, catch a category quietly moving up or down, comparing against what normal should look like for a business at your stage, and connecting profit to your cash margin to owner pay all at once. Because we're looking at that full picture, right? And that's advisory work. It's a different job. It's a different skill set. That's where you need that monthly conversation with someone who knows what to look for. And it's the piece most creative business owners have never had. And it's a piece, again, that answers 3 out of 5 of those questions. How do you know if you actually answer the question, am I making money? Or are you just hoping the answer is yes? You might be looking at this episode and thinking, Samantha, I already know if I'm making money. I don't need you. I don't need anybody else in my books. I don't need anybody else in my finances. I already know I'm making money. And if you truly do, good, but there's some things that you might know that might lead me to believe that you're not fully answering that question yet, and you just believe you're making money, but you don't know. And there's signs that the honest answer is just currently unclear in the business that you're running currently. one of the things is you can name your revenue offhand, but you can't name your profit. You don't know what your profit number is. If you know what your revenue is, but you don't know what your profit is, that is one of the biggest issues. You just had a good month, so maybe a good month on paper, and you can't say why it was good or whether it will happen again. So you can't find the repeatable patterns that you need. Your profit and your cash just don't seem to have a matchup, and you're not sure why. So you can't understand why your profit doesn't match the cash in your bank, and you just can't reconcile the two of them. Again, as I explained, those two are different, but oftentimes when you're doing your books on your own and you're not having the support that you need, you don't understand the difference. Your P&L looks fine and you're paying yourself out of savings, or you can't pay yourself at all this month. If you can't pay yourself at all this month, that is a very serious sign that you don't actually know if you're making money. You're growing and your bank account isn't, or you're steady and your bank account is dropping. Again, that's a sign where we have a mismatch somewhere and we really need to understand what's going on so that we can help you to hopefully keep more of that cash in your pocket. You feel like your business is doing well and the actual numbers don't confirm the feeling one way or the other. Again, if you're not having this conversation monthly and you're not talking to someone about this, oftentimes those feelings are going to get missed. Being in business for yourself is something that is very emotional. Us as women business owners, us as business owners in general know that. We know that there's this constant fear of, am I doing good enough? Am I doing this? And I want to make it clear to you that working with someone like me, working with a bookkeeper, working with a fractional CFO is a necessity. It's not necessarily an option, right? It's something that you need in order to grow and get to that next stage of your business. You can't fully understand your business if you're just doing your books and having your P&L and doing your taxes at the end of the year. You're just going through the motions, right? When you need and you are ready to grow, that's when you need to really look at your business through a specific lens and actually pull it up, okay? So again, the 5-question answer to am I making money is exactly what my new package Wildfire was built to give you every month. That is the full-on CFO package. That's where we give you everything that we have to offer. Advisory, we give you profitability, we give you KPIs, we give you cash flow, we give you everything like that. It really helps you to build that. That's an option for you if that's something you're ready for, but it's not a necessity. We have a forecast where each number tells you which each number is heading. And of course, again, we have that advisory conversation that reads the story. This is an option. Again, you don't have to do this, but if you're tired of asking yourself, am I making a money? And you're not sure of the answer, then either send me an email or DM me Making Money on Instagram and let's talk about whether Wildfire is a fit. I never want to push a package onto someone or push services onto someone if they're not ready for it. But if you've been feeling like, am I actually making money? And that question is one of the top things on your mind, even just having a conversation to see where we can maybe figure out if you are or not is so vital. And we don't have to work together. That's not something I ever want to force on someone, but I want to be able to answer your questions and provide you with some sort of help so that you can figure out if you are actually making money, right? As always, you guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please like it, share it, subscribe. I would appreciate you sharing this with your friends. It is such a vital conversation to actually understanding our businesses and if we're making money. If you need to have a conversation, like I said, please feel free to DM me on Instagram or shoot me an email, Samantha@firestormfinance.com. I'd love to chat with you. There's no commitment ever to sign up for a package with me. Questions are always free. And more often than not, I want to be able to answer your questions first before we actually get into any sort of package. Because you're scared, right? You don't know who's coming into your business. You don't know me personally. You are worried that I'm going to see something in your books and I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, girl, you are terrible. First of all, never do that. I'm someone who really is supportive. I want to be that support structure for your business, and I want your business to blossom and grow in the way that it needs to blossom and grow, okay? As always, you guys, I wish you the best week ever, and we're going to see you next week. Farewell, my fellow travelers.